Welcome. Let's talk about nested ifs. So now we know how to code the selection program instruction using the if and else statements. However, sometimes we need to make a decision inside of another decision. So for example, you might want to eat something today. I mean, who doesn't? But let's say you have the option to eat pizza or a hamburger. And let's say that you come to the conclusion that you want to eat pizza. But now you have to make the decision. What do you want to eat? Thin crust? Do you want to eat a stuffed crust? Do you want to eat pan dish? Which kind of pizza do you want to eat? So it's a decision inside of another decision. So in this video, we're going to learn how we do that using the concept of nested ifs. So here we have the selection program instruction. And if you remember from last video, I said that inside of the if scope or the scope of the else statement, we can write any code we want. So that code that we have in the true path or on the if statement side is this thing that we have right here, right? And I can write anything, which means that if I want to make a decision inside of another decision, well, I could just include another decision in this path. And so the way that I do that is I can come here and let's say I erase some stuff, so make some space, right? We're going to leave something there. And then in here, what I want to do, well, I want to make another decision. And let's say I'm going to label this as C2 for condition number 2 to be different from the first diamond. And then, of course, in here, we also have our true path, and we also have our false path, right? And then within the true path, I can have, these options, and within the false path, I have these options. So imagine that in this one, in the top part, we say, okay, well, this is pizza to the right, and then this is hamburger, right? I'm just going to say ham. All right, to the left. And then within here, well, we have thin crust on this side, and then this one you have stuff. Crust, right? And then these are we're eating the thin crust pizza part. Let's say we eat it different, and then we eat the stuffed crust on this side on the left. So now I have one decision, another inside of another decision, and we call this a nested if because remember the way we code the selection program instruction, namely this part right here. Well, that's using an if and else statement, right? And that's inside another. If I make some space here. This inside another if and else statement, right? So this is called a nested if. So now let's go take a look at how we do this in code. Here we are where we left off last time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two Boolean variables to represent two conditions, right? I'm just going to call it bool condition 1, and this is going to be true, and I'm going to make condition 2, and this is also going to be true. And I think I misspelled something here. There you go, condition 2, right? And instead of talking about whether we wear a sweater or not, I'm going to delete these and I'm going to type here condition 1, right? So what we said was that when condition 1 is true, anything we write in here will run. And when it's false, then anything that we write in here, it's what's going to run. Now I want to make use of condition number 2, and let's just say that I want to make a decision inside of another decision. Well, once I have already made a decision, that means I run either this code or this code. Well, then in there, I get to make another decision. So that means in here, inside of the scope of the if statement, I can write another decision. I can come here and say if condition 2, and this I'm going to use the other variable. And then in here, I can say, whatever I want to say. So let's just say printf inside, let's just say condition, let's just say 1 is true and 2 is also true, right? Because in this case, for this to run, condition 1 has to be true in order for us to run this. And then for this to run, also condition 2 will also have to be true for this to run, right? So if both of them are true right now, we run this, and then here you go. 1 is true, 2 is true. Okay, so far so good. And also we can have a full selection program instruction. I can also use the else keyword, right? And in here I can say what? Well, 1 is going to be true because again, all of this has to be true for it to run. But now 2 has to be what? False for this to run, right? Because it has to be in the else statement. So if I make this false and I run this, now we have 1 is true, 2 is false. Okay, that's good. And then in here, I can also have a decision in the false part of my first decision. So in here, I can also have if, let's just say, I'm going to reuse condition 2. And in here, and then also I'm going to do an else. and then I'm going to copy this, but instead this is going to be what? This is when 1 is false and 2 is true, and then this one, I'm going to copy this here, and this is when condition 1 is false and also condition 2 is false, right? So if I make this false, well, false and false, that's going to be the bottom one, right? So let's run it. Here you go, false and false. And if we make the bottom one true, well, we're going to get the third one, which is 1 is false, 2 is true, which is this one right here. So now we have one one selection programming structure inside of another selection programming structure. In fact, we have two. One when we are in the false path, and another one when we are in the true path. And what's very interesting is that you can do this as many times as you want. So I can come here, and let's just say I can just come and put another one. If, let's just say true, right? Because I don't have another condition. Let's just say I want to use the keyword true. And here you have a third decision inside of my second decision, which is inside of my first decision, right? And guess what? You can do another one. So I can do another if true, and I can keep on going. Just as many if statements that I need. Some of them can be simply an if statement. Other ones could be what? Other ones could be an if true, and let's just say with an else, right? Because the else is optional. Sometimes you only need to do something when the true path, or you only need to do something for the true path, but you do nothing for the false path. So in here, notice I have some if statements, and here another one, and here another one, and this one has an else statement. What is very important to realize from all of this is that you can make as many decisions as you need to, and you can organize them in any way that you can. What exactly do I mean by that? Well, let me delete this real quick, right? And let's just make this a little bit simpler so that you can see what I'm talking about. And let's just say printf, condition 1 is false, right? Now, what I want you to realize here is that when does this run? This run when condition 1 is true, and when it goes in there, condition 2 has to also be true, and then this run. This sounds very similar. Let me word it in a different way. When does this run? When condition 1 is true and condition 2 is true, right? Well, I have written a nested if statement, and I have an error here, but I have written a nested if statement, but in reality, this could also be a conditional operation, right? I can, let's just leave this as is, and let me write it in a second time up here. And I'm going to say if condition 1 is true and condition 2 is also true, then we can write this piece of code here, right? And let's leave it like that. So we should get this message. Let's make this true, because otherwise it won't work. Right? So now, if this is true and this is true, this is going to run. If this is true, I go in. If this is true, I go in. Then this is going to run. Which means what? Means I can run. This is supposed to show twice. So let's run this. All right? 1 is true, 2 is true, and then here's the second time. 1 is true, 2 is true. So what I want you to realize is that these two, and let's delete this, these two are basically the same. In one, we decided to write it as a nested if. In the other one, we use a conditional operation. So you might have the question, well, which one should I use? Which one is better? And the answer to that is, well, it depends. Ultimately, they both do the same thing. Why would you go for the first one over the second one or the other way around? Really depends on the logic of your application. I mean, they do the same thing, right? So you could argue, well, if I like this one, I should always do this one. And if I like this one, I should always do this one. And my suggestion is that that's probably not the best criteria to decide which one you do. I would say the best criteria is whether condition 1 and condition 2 are related to one another. See, the thing is, you want to make this if statement or this if statement appear somewhat like, it's intuitive. Like if you come and you look at this code, you can say, oh, I know what it does. And if you look at this code, you say, oh, I know what it does. So if condition 1 and condition 2 are related to your decision, then it makes sense to combine them in a conditional operation. But if condition 1 and condition 2 are not related, then perhaps it's better to separate them like this, and it will make much more sense to the person reading it, and even to yourself in the future, why you structure your code in a particular way. So for example, let's say you're talking about buying something, and you say, well, my condition number 1 is that I have money to buy it, and condition number 2 is that that item is available for me to buy. Well, both are needed to be true for me to actually buy the item. So it makes sense to put them together as a conditional operation. But let's just say that you talk about two things that are completely unrelated. So let's say you're driving and you say, should I take a right turn? And you say, yes, I should take a right turn. And then after you take a right turn, you say, oh, this song that came out on the radio, I really like it. I should increase the volume. Should I increase the volume? And then you go and say, okay, let me increase the volume, right? Certainly, if we change that logic into a way that looks like this, we would say, if I turn right and the song that I like comes up, I'm going to turn up the volume. You see, they're very unrelated. So certainly you could do that. It works. But once you look at the code, you're like, wait, is there something related about the volume and turning right? Because, why are they together like this? And so the point here is that you want to organize your code in a particular way that makes sense. And sometimes it makes more sense to have a nested if, and sometimes it makes more sense to just simply have an if statement. Now, the last thing is that you don't always can make this out of this. Sometimes these conditions are very complicated. I mean, we use a true and a true, right? But sometimes this operation can be very convoluted, and maybe this condition 1 depends on the result of other conditions, and condition 2 also depend on some of the similar conditions, which makes it difficult and almost impossible for you to convert a nested if to a simple if statement with a conditional operation. So when that happens, it is way more simpler. It makes more sense to just simply go and do a nested if. Not to mention that once you have an if and else inside of the first if statement, well, how do you convert this into a simple if? You couldn't. You would have to be able to make more if statements and play more with the conditions to be able to achieve that. So when it makes sense, use nested if. When it's, it kind of follows the part of making sense, which is when you cannot do it with a simple if, we'll simply just go with a nested if. So the concept of nested ifs is that we can have a decision inside of another decision. In the next video, we're going to discuss what happens when you have to make a decision out of many different paths. So for example, if I say, which color do you want? That's not a right or left or a true or false or do I do it or do I not. This implies you picking one thing out of many choices, right? So we're going to talk about that in the next video, and it's a very important concept to understand, which is part of the selection programming structure. So make sure you check out that as well. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. If you found this video useful, if you learned something and you don't mind, leave a like. If you're new to this channel, check out the series, check out the channel, and if you like what you see, subscribe, be safe, and peace out.